Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the Capacity Building webinar. We're so happy that you're here. We have lots of great people for you to meet today. We're talking about probably one of the most important subjects to be talking about on this December the 5th. It has been a long year. We're going to be talking about a bit of that burnout and some of those solutions. It's my pleasure to welcome a number of people to the show, of course, today, and that's Hannah Rockburn. Hi, Hannah. There
Hi,
she
Sam.
is. Hi, Hannah. How are you?
I'm good.
And we've brought a friend with us. Krystyn Tully's here. Hi, Krystyn.
Hello.
It's great to have you here. Hannah, tell us a little bit about you and what you do. And usually you're behind the scenes, and I'm so happy to see you in front of the camera today.
Yeah, so I am the operations manager for Eco-Internships and the Capacity Building Institute. I've been involved with the environmental sector for just over 2 years myself. So I came straight out of university studying earth sciences and did an internship actually through the organizations, which is how I got all involved, and have been fortunate enough to sort of stay on. And I've become more of that management role and helping kind of bring together the intern training program. So I help with the curriculum there, and I also help the organizations and employers with helping hiring interns and their staffing and HR support. So that's sort of where I'm coming from tonight, is the aspect of training people in terms of self-care and burnout.
Well, you're the glue that keeps us together, for sure. I've relied on you more than once, and we'll talk about all of that good stuff as well. And Krystyn Tully, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I have been in and around the nonprofit sector for well over 20 years. I've helped found and manage an organization. I've been on boards, I've volunteered, and I studied nonprofit management in school. So I kind of have dabbled in all the different areas. And now I'm the CEO of a social enterprise that creates tools to help organizations build an equitable and sustainable society, basically doing all of the things to create the resources and support that I wish I had 20 years ago.
Brilliant, brilliant. I'm so grateful you're here. Lots of other people are here too. We would love you to throw in the chat, where are you coming from today? All across the country. We know I'm always love to see in the chat where you're coming from. So give us a shout out. Let us know where you're coming from. We've got lots of people helping us today. We're going to be spending some time with Chantal High a little bit later. Owen is behind the scenes, making sure we all sound fantastic and everything stays on track technically. And of course, the one, the only, Rob Barnes is here. Rob Barnes, how are you?
Great, Sam. Hi, everyone. Nice to see you. Yeah, things are good. How are you, Sam?
Good. I'm turning it over to you. I want to hear all about the Capacity Building Institute.
All right. Well, thank you for that. I'm going to just give a few brief words of introduction before we get underway tonight. Just want to say to everyone, thank you so much for joining us. This is the 12th session of the year, and we're capping off the year with some great panelists. So really looking forward to the conversation today. I'm going to share my screen now. This is you are now at the Capacity series, which is brought to you by Capacity Building Institute. And Capacity Building Institute is an organization that provides capacity building training and support to small environmental nonprofits. Basically, the idea is to help Canada's nonprofit sector and the environmental sector in particular, and with the aim of training environmental leaders in a number of different areas. And this webinar series explores a number of those areas, often around themes of how do I run an organization, or how do I join a board, and how do I fulfill my obligations as a board member? But we really kind of explore a wide range of topics. And the reason is simple. The challenges that we face as a sector are huge. And we think that the Canadian environmental community needs all the help it can get, and we want to help make it equal to its vital task. So there are a few kind of core beliefs that we have at Capacity Building Institute. We think Canada's environment deserves all the help it can get, that environmental nonprofits play an absolutely vital role, that training really matters, so that the training we deliver really can result in meaningful change and improvement for the tasks that we face. That small shops in particular, these are small organizations, sometimes very scrappy, tiny amounts of staff, sometimes no staff at all. They do some really vital grassroots work. They make a big difference. And finally, there's so much more to do. So that's why we're here. And that's why we're here tonight. We offer a number of different training programs, and if folks are interested, I'll have an email at the end. Please get in touch with me at Capacity Building Institute. Happy to connect you to the right people. Today is number 4 on this list, the Capacity Series. And we have a number of trainers from across the sector, including Sam, she's an amazing host, but is also an incredible fundraiser and a fundraising professional. So all sorts of expertise on communications, fundraising, organizational management and development that folks bring to the table at Capacity Building Institute. Some of you might see Dominique Souris in the news, formerly with Youth Climate Lab. She took the our executive director training program called the Capacity Building Certificate Program, and highly recommends it. And she's one of our amazing grads running out into the world and doing amazing things. I recently saw her at the Conference of the Parties in Egypt, so she's out there making a splash internationally. And Anna Giovanetti from the Canadian Environmental Network as well took the training and benefited from it. We've got hundreds of students, and I think Hannah tonight is going to tell you about the experience working with so many of them. So we do have this Capacity Speaker Series. We're always looking for amazing guests, and we're always looking for folks to join us. So you can check out our YouTube channel for past webinars, but also stay tuned for more information because we deliver these once a month. So those are the next 2 sessions. We really hope you can join us. And there's the email if you want to get a hold of us for whatever reason. Love to hear from you. And without further ado, I'll hand it back over to Sam. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much, Rob. Always learn something from you there. I appreciate that very much. So today, this conversation is one that we tend to have in hushed ways, right? So we might say to a really trusted person, I'm exhausted, I'm completely burnt out. And we might get some support there. The fact that, when they mentioned to me that this was a conversation that we were going to have and it was going to be on the 5th of December, honestly, it made me a bit emotional because this topic of stress in the nonprofit world is not new. It's been a long, long time. But I think bringing it and putting some sunshine on it is the best disinfectant, they say. Krystyn, when you think about, what's happening in terms of the nonprofit world and everything we've been asked to do, not only in the last 2.5 years, but prior to that, what comes to mind? What emotions come to mind for you?
A lot of emotions, all the emotions. I think that even before the pandemic, the topic of burnout came up a lot, usually after hours at conferences, maybe over a drink or a coffee, like you say. So, that idea that it's something that people suffer from or suffer with in secret. Mm-hmm. And we saw it playing out in high turnover. Very few executive directors see themselves in their job 5 years from now. Very few see themselves staying in the sector once they leave their current job. And it's hard to recruit people to take on roles like this when the people who are doing it are not showing them that it can be a really great experience. So a lot of that like secrecy and shame comes to mind. And then the last couple of years with the COVID pandemic, it breaks my heart that nonprofits in a lot of ways are the organizations and the people who are going to try to rebuild society after a very challenging couple of years. And our services are needed now more than ever before. And yet the people doing this work receive less support and less respect than ever before. So there's a little bit of sadness and a little bit of anger. But at the same time, the fact that people keep showing up to do this work and have been showing up for centuries, and just like the one thing that we can't do is turn our backs on our communities. And there are always people who believe that. And so that kind of hope and excitement comes in at the last minute and keeps me going.
Mm-hmm. For sure. What are your thoughts when you hear Krystyn speak, Hannah? You've certainly had your fair share of moments, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think for me, I definitely experienced burnout even as a student, right? When it comes to exam times and midterms, you're always pushing yourself that extra bit. And then those bad habits tend to transfer when you actually have a job, and especially if it's one of your first jobs coming out of school. So personally experiencing burnout's definitely been a thing for me. And then also working with interns where they are just coming out of school themselves and getting that time management and that work-life balance, especially if they're working from home all the time and not coming into an office, to have that separation between work and home has been a challenge. And we hear that from the interns a lot as well.
Mm-hmm. And it comes to mind. I remember about 5 years ago, someone sat me down and they said, Sam, no is a complete sentence. And I was like, what? And they're like, no, you can just say no. Like if somebody asks you to do something and it's not driving your own, whatever you're hoping to accomplish, whether that be in your position or your personal life or whatever, you don't have to explain yourself. You don't have to say yes because of and all that kind of stuff. So when I heard that no is a complete sentence, that opened up a massive world for me, although I do have a hard time still saying no. But I think, especially during the pandemic, so much was layered on. And I think there was this sense of, well, you're not driving to work anymore and you're not, you're not having to do all these other sort of things. So there's more time in the day. So we're going to layer on this and this and this on top. And then you kind of went, yeah, but there's a pandemic, but my world changed. My cup's not getting filled with anything else. And it's overflowing with all the stuff. That's just me, Krystyn. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that's how it felt for me. I'd love to know your thoughts.
I think a lot of people, like I can't see faces, but I feel like there were a lot of heads nodding there as you were talking. And it's that idea that burnout is something that happens with, like, it's built on layers of experience. It's not like one thing happens. It's first there's this, and a lot of the things that turn into burnout start out as being really amazing. Like the excitement and the energy of loving the work that you do means you want to do more of it. You think about it when you're not doing it. It gives you energy. So in the beginning, the exact thing that's pulling you in is going to be the thing that feels like the burden later on. But just to maybe like really underscore that feeling thing, we talk a lot about burnout, and my personal passion is really looking at what organizations do that creates burnout and the role that managers can play in preventing it, because I think that just waiting until people are burnt out and then trying to heal them is not the right approach. But recognizing what those feelings are, like what's the difference between a stressful experience, a bad day, and like actual long-term burnout that requires attention. And it's that idea of exhaustion. Like you can't sleep enough on a weekend to make up for it. Like you just have nothing left. You mentioned that empty cup. It's not getting filled. And a kind of alienation or a disconnect from your work, or a cynicism, because honestly, when you care too, like so much all the time and it starts to weigh on you, just caring less is a way of protecting yourself. So when you start to feel like you can't connect with the things you used to connect with, that's definitely a warning sign. And then that feeling of like, it's never enough. No matter how hard I work or how much I do, that to-do list is only going to get longer. And, I'm not going to solve racism by the end of the year. I'm not going to fix climate change at this conference. Yeah. We're staring some pretty tough problems in the face all day, every day. And so like really understanding what happens when you get all three of those feelings simultaneously will allow us to recognize and talk about burnout.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I certainly heard the term maybe about 15 years ago now for the first time. I'm obviously not a counselor. I know nothing about this other than the fact that, I've done a bit of reading about it and I sort of like identify with it, is the term compassion fatigue. And I think, when we hear about that you care so much that it literally exhausts you. And then potentially, well, maybe you're just leaving your home office and you're going downstairs and the kids want goldfish crackers and they want this. And, if you have a family too, that adds another layer, a lot of sickness, a lot of illness, a lot of loss in the last couple of years. So I think compassion fatigue is something that, it's real. Let's put it that way, Hannah. Would you agree, Hannah?
Yes, definitely. I find like, and then like the symptoms too of like burnout, like you can try to catch it a little earlier, but they can also just be really similar to other symptoms as well. And so like fatigue and insomnia, and especially this time of year when it's getting dark, and it's like, so then you get that seasonal depression layering on top of it. It can be a very real thing. And it's hard to sometimes distinguish what, if it's burnout or if it's just something else, but it's just to keep in mind and to acknowledge that those symptoms are there and to start preventing into doing something about it when you know them.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's talk about some of those solutions. How do you care for yourself, Krystyn?
Well, I'm learning. I think like a lot of people that are attracted to this work, our first thing is what do other people need? So yeah, that's I think for me, the most important thing is understanding what my values are and making sure that the way I'm spending my time and the people I'm spending my time with and the commitments that I'm making reinforce those values. And then when I make a mistake or get stuck or struggle, forgiving myself and not being attached to this idea that everything needs to be perfect all the time. Because I think we can put a lot of pressure and stress, create a lot of stress for ourselves. But then how I spend my work time is helping people and organizations figure out, well, what can we do that's different? Because it's easy to forget how young our sector is. Like, we're not talking about a type of work that's been around for hundreds and hundreds of years, and we get this lovely, robust curriculum and manual that we can follow. We're figuring it out. And I think there's a lot of management techniques and styles that we've seen in place for a few decades that the next generation of leaders and managers and activists is looking at going, I don't think we want to do things those ways. So, new ways of managing workload and managing people's time and building consent into your organization. And you talked about saying no, which I think means you have to have a really clear strategy, something deeper and more thought through than just like, I care a lot, because you need to know what to say no to and what to say yes to. That really gets to the heart of your strategy. And so what we do and how we do it, thinking about that and being very intentional is I think the approach that will build healthier organizations in the long run.
And I think part of it for me, and I, really identified this. Well, I do analytics for a living. When I'm not on the air, I work in analytics. And I think part of it with all the clients that I work with is how are we measuring and what and how are we measuring? And then what defines success? Because I don't think we are bored sometimes, and I'm not blaming boards. I'm just saying board sometimes, management, other stakeholders may not see the wins, right, in the win column. Because oftentimes I think about fundraising, or whether it be, any sort of nonprofit work, as a big iceberg where we're seeing this at the top. Everybody knows what this looks like, but nobody knows what the 5 deep looks like. And so if we're being judged by just the stuff up here, then this whole massive iceberg underneath is literally weighing on all of our shoulders, but we don't measure it in a way that we go, okay, well, we're trying to partner with somebody. Well, we reached out to 20 people and one person said yes. Well, we might go, okay, that's great. We've got this partnership, but these 19 calls, there's some success in there, but we're not measuring, our success very well, I think, in terms of the nonprofit world. So it can lead to burnout because I don't think people are celebrating some of those wins. What are your thoughts on that, Hannah?
Yeah, like I feel like in terms when it coming to burnout, like and preventing it, it's really, you have to embed it in your organizational culture to have it where they feel safe enough in the environment that they can say no, that they know what they can come to a manager about and say, I'm feeling done this week, like something's happened, I'm just not going to be that good, I need to take a step back, like, and enforcing that positive work culture and having those expectations up front as a manager with your employees and even in interns, like so that they can feel comfortable enough to go. And having that support system is really important. So like, I know for our internships, like we always want to promote self-care, and like one of the activities that we kind of encourage all the interns to do. And I am guilty of not doing enough myself. But it's called like the grow activities that we implemented. So Christina came up with this for the training, and it's to help them where we give them 30 minutes of paid work time every day that they have to go through their goal activities. So G is like for making SMART goals and to reflect on them. And then we have reading. So we encourage them to do like 10 pages of reading. That's a self-development of some kind, and then getting outside. So just making sure that at some point, if it's a lunch break, it doesn't have to be like a physical, like exercising activity. It could just be going out and enjoying the sun or the snow. And then also writing down either your goals or journaling of some kind, and then enforcing that. I find is really helpful because it gives them a chance to kind of reflect on what they want to do. And then it also forces them to like go outside, take those breaks. Like if you're having a lunch, like make sure to take that half hour or an hour and like go and enjoy the outdoors, which I find with burnout, you also just think of mental health. So like they kind of just go hand in hand. So having a positive and healthy mental health in the workplace is kind of reflects well on helping prevent burnout overall.
Absolutely. Can I steal that growth thing? That's brilliant. I love it.
Yeah.
I think that's really good for everyone on the call today too, to hear about that. Hannah mentioned that word culture, and culture can feel really big. You can't create a culture on your own. So many of us are that A-type personality, just want to get in there, just let me do it. But culture is a team sport, right? So Krystyn, what advice would you have in terms of culture?
Yeah, I think one piece of sort of specific and practical advice for leaders is I think a big part of a leader's job is to create meaning, whether you approach it as storytelling, whether it's a coaching thing, and people will do it differently, but it really is your job to make sure that everyone that works for your organization, the board, your close donors, they understand what it is that you're trying to do, why it's important, who's on the team, what roles they play on the team, and how each individual person's work every day is contributing to achieving certain outcomes that will get you to those goals. Because it's so easy to lose yourself in the actual tasks. And then when someone comes along and says, oh yeah, this is what we are doing, we're solving this problem, we're helping this community, we're helping this group of people. Here's some data that shows a big picture. Here's an anecdotal story of one person whose life we changed. That is incredibly important in helping get through some of the tougher times and the stressful times. And I think leaders need to do that for their team. And then on the sort of flip of the culture is what happens with everyone else. I think that sharing the stress and sharing the weight of the work is incredibly important, whether you officially share responsibilities in terms of your organizational chart, or whether it's just an informal way that people have of relating to each other. I think a really outdated model of organizational culture is where the people at the top carry these really heavy burdens alone. They have a lot of power, but they're also incredibly isolated. And that building a team where everyone is working equally to accomplish a goal make sure that there isn't really one person that's suffering in silence. And so that culture of sharing is I think really important and powerful.
That I've been there. It's the loneliest place. It's really lonely because you feel very, very isolated for sure. One thing I know about people that work in nonprofit, I'll put my own hand up, is that we're very passionate. We know what we want to do. We, have these goals. We work with the board. We do all that. But when it comes to asking for what we need, so, if we're asked to bake a cake and we're only given a bowl and an egg, I find it's really, really hard still for us to go, but what about the flour, the butter, the sugar? Because we're like, oh, well, we don't want to ask for more money. We don't want to bother anybody. We don't want to rock the boat. So we sit there stirring this egg forever, hoping that a cake comes out. And at the end of the day, there's no cake. But we're continuing to do that and asking for those resources. Hannah, do you have a hard time, or do you find the people you work with have a hard time sort of putting up their hand saying, I need a laptop, or I need a membership to Zoom, or I need more storage space, whatever it is? We have a hard time asking for those things.
Yeah, I find that I definitely, especially when working with interns, right? Like they're at like just entering the organization, they may not be as familiar with it when they first start. and they might not necessarily feel as comfortable asking for those supports, or they know that there's not a lot of money maybe because we work a lot with small shop organizations, so they have a very limited budget to begin with. So hearing like they're not sure if they can ask for those or if it's not available. And thankfully we do work with like wage subsidy grants, and so they usually do provide some additional funding and money for those types of supports. But yeah, there's definitely that barrier of, can I ask for it? Is that something I'm allowed to do? And then just having that talk with the manager at the forefront to kind of be like, this is what I need to get my work done from home or in office.
Mm-hmm. The one thing, and I don't know if it's just because I'm a lot older than you two, but I think lessons that I've learned over the years is just finding that safe space to have the conversations. And it always hasn't been safe spaces for me. And then you learn another lesson, which is like a really bad lesson, which is a whole other webinar topic. But talk to me a little bit, Krystyn, about that, how we can support each other and create those safe spaces for these conversations, and then take them from conversations to action to overall, hopefully change.
Yeah, it's a great point, and it is a good caveat or caution, is that sometimes you won't be in a safe space. And so not assuming or taking for granted that if you phrase something the right way, that this magical conversation will happen. And so, yeah, just know where you are and proceed, I guess, appropriately, seek help or have a conversation with someone that you feel safe with. But then within that, gosh, my brain went in two directions at the same time there. The safety piece, I think, really comes from this need to understand that, okay, you've got your personal needs, and sometimes you need someone with a bigger perspective to reframe things for you. Okay, you're feeling overwhelmed, but let's understand that people feel overwhelmed when they have an ability to actually see how a plan comes together. You see all the different things that need to be done. That's actually a really profound and powerful skill that makes people great managers. You just, especially earlier in your career, you need to understand that, okay, when you see that chaos, don't be afraid. You actually have an ability to do something that other people can't do. The question is, what do you do next when you get into that moment? And that's where great managers and great coaches can help you sort of get to the next level. Then there are other situations where actually there is too much to do. It is actually impossible to do the thing that you're being expected to do. And so then you can't beat yourself up for that, or feel shame, or feel like you're letting people down. You've got to protect against and ward off those feelings that there's something wrong with you. And whether there's someone in your environment who can help you with that, or whether that's something that you do on your own. If you're really feeling in the thick of it and overwhelmed, one of the first things you need to do is figure out, is it me or is it my environment? One of my favorite expressions about burnout is that we don't blame a cucumber for becoming a pickle. If you are in an environment that is toxic, or there's too much pressure, it will change you, and it's not because of something that you've done wrong. And so your strategies for dealing with burnout under those two different circumstances are very, very different. So the step one is, is it me? Is it my environment? Or is it some combination of the two? Figure that out before you build a plan.
And you just brought me to a place. I was in a really toxic workplace at one point, and when I was set free, when I decided to move on and I started working somewhere else, I remember like about the third week, I was like, what's happening here? That isn't the way you need to live. And when you're in it, though, you can't see, right? It's foggy. But when you get out of it and you look back, that's when you realize that how toxic it was. Sometimes you have to remove yourself from it. What, Hannah, when you think about all of the, opportunities for us to talk about mental health right now, and to, we have this webinar today, but all the, different resources that would be out there, is there anything that sort of, comes to mind for you in terms of somebody that's wanting to maybe reach out and have a conversation with somebody for the very first, the very, very first time? Is there anything that you could sort of think about that would be a good first step?
Yeah, like I think depending if you have a team or not that you're working with, like sometimes it might not be the manager right away that you might want to go to. If you have a coworker or someone that is in the same field that's maybe that has the same sort of circumstances that you have or understands it, then you might be more comfortable expressing that to them. It's more of really having that support system. And then if that's either a friend or a coworker, and to at least start that conversation. And then there's lots of resources online about identifying it and like helping that side. But I find at least finding that support system, whether that be personal or work related. And then when you talk through it and kind of get more comfortable with it, then you might be able to then potentially go up to like supervisor level and talk a little bit more about that, depending on your relationship with your manager. But I think that would be a first step, is to talk to someone about it. That doesn't necessarily have to be higher level management at first. And just have that support system. And that's one thing that we always try to do with our internship program, is that we assign a mentor to every intern, so that they're separate from the organization, but they've been interns themselves, they've gone through it. And so it gives them someone a little bit more, it feels maybe on their level to talk about. That's not necessarily, there won't be repercussions for saying something, you won't get fired because of it. So having that support system, I find, is really, really important.
Absolutely. What would you say to somebody, maybe Krystyn, that's listening right now, and they're feeling a bit hopeless about their own situation?
Well, first, if that it does describe you, you're not alone. Absolutely. I think that's the most important thing to realize, is that there are more people thinking that and going through that than there are who haven't in our sector, which is sad, but potentially reassuring. If you're I think for people that have a difficult time advocating for themselves, because we're taught for a million different cultural reasons not to do that, or within our sector, we're taught not to do that. Think about it for other people. So, one thing that jumps out at me when I look at the state of working conditions and decent work in the nonprofit sector is the intersectionality, where we talk about the nonprofit sector, but 77% of the workforce is women. So if we say that nonprofit workers aren't entitled to decent work, we're saying 77% of the women working in this sector aren't entitled to decent work. Newcomers are almost half of the workforce. Racialized workers are almost 30% of the workforce. So if you're trying to figure out how to muster up the fight to fight for yourself, or to fight for what you need, think about who else is on your side and who else you're representing, and who else is there, even if they're not physically present in the room with you, and advocate for them the way that you would if they could hear you, and just include yourself in that group that you're advocating for. And that can make it a lot easier. And it doesn't sound as much like you're asking for a raise for yourself, or you're asking to make things easier for yourself. It's remembering, who are you and who do you represent, and what does your community deserve?
I want to take some time now, because we do have a couple of questions coming in. I want to take some time to look at that, and then we'll do that. Then we'll stop a little bit and we'll introduce Chantel, and then we'll be able to wrap together. Does that sound good to you too? Okay, so I'm going to read this. This is from Alexandra. Sometimes I struggle to tell the difference between something that is, this is going to be something we just chatted about. I'll start again. Some things I struggle to tell the difference between is that a me problem or something that is an organizational problem. It makes it very hard to ask for help because I'm not sure if I'm entitled to ask, or if that I could reveal my incompetence, or that I am a good judge of exactly how much is a reasonable workload. Alexandra, I can't even tell you how much this question means to me. I think it's brilliant. I love the way you worded it. I'm going to ask Hannah to take a first shot.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's really dependent on maybe on your relationship with your manager. Like, as a manager myself, I always try to be very open with my employees and encourage them to come to me if they're finding it's overloaded. I have that one-to-one meeting with them. So then that way, if they can say like, this is what I'm working on, or I'm falling behind in this, that we can like adjust the scheduling as needed to make sure that they don't feel too overwhelmed, but the work's still getting done. So if you happen to have that relationship, or even just request, if that is something you're not sure about, request that one-on-one meeting and kind of just go over what you've been working on and what you feel like you need additional help with, and kind of coming up with those questions ahead of time, knowing what you can and what you need help with, I think would kind of help steer that conversation. So you're not necessarily saying, oh, I'm incompetent, I don't know what I'm doing. It's more of, I know what I'm doing, I just need this extra little help. And I find your manager and supervisor hopefully would be a little bit more like willing to kind of adjust and accommodate with you.
Krystyn, what do you think?
Yeah, I like Hannah's suggestion, and I would add to it specifically the thing that works for me, because I'm very visual, is if your workload, if you think it's too much, whether it's on a weekly basis or a daily basis, monthly, whatever, make a list of the things that you're being expected to do and how long you think it will take you to do each of those. And then if your work week is, 35 hours or whatever, you make your 35 little boxes and you color in each one for all the tasks. And if your boxes are full, that's where the task list has to end. And so it's just, look at the number of hours you have available, the amount of work you have to do. And if the amount of work you have to do is greater than the number of hours you have available, at 9 a.m. on Monday morning, you are not getting it done by Friday afternoon. And that's a great moment to go to a coworker with more experience or your manager and just show them those two things. Here's what I have to do. Here are my hours. I can't make it fit, or I'm having a difficult time making it fit, and ask for their advice. And most managers will go, oh, here's 10 things to cross off. This isn't as important as I thought now that you put it in context. But honestly, a lot of managers don't remember all the different things that we ask people to do. And so we may not realize exactly what we put on someone's to-do list over the course of a couple of weeks.
Or the time it takes to do something, right? I mean, if I'm saying, okay, Giving Tuesday is coming up, I need some posts, I need, if I'm the manager and I'm like, okay, we need this done, I need this done, this done. Well, I don't realize that you've got to get creative for that post. They've got to maybe get it translated. They have to get, it approved, and then we've got to post it. All of a sudden it's like, well, I'm saying just do a post. I'm thinking, well, that's 5 minutes, where you're thinking like, that's 2 hours or whatever it is, right? So I think there's a lot of validity in that for sure. So I'm just seeing from Charlie. Hi, Charlie. I love when Charlie shows up. I think you're here all the time, by the way, Charlie, and we appreciate it. Charlie is saying, I've seen some workplaces successfully implement anonymous forms for this kind of thing too. Brilliant. Absolutely. Rob's suggesting everybody put any question, of course, in the chat. So I think we've answered that one for Alexandra. We've got some feedback as well from Dara, and I think Dara is talking about some of the issues regarding codependency and narcissistic abuse. I'm Indigenous. A huge source of these issues come from intergenerational trauma that exists in our communities, colonialism as a result of colonialism and resource extraction, and really, really important conversation there as well, Dara. I think I really value that as well. Thank you for your feedback. We're seeing Julie ask a question here. This is a really great conversation for all the amazing people who are working with passion. But what about the ED, the GM, or the CAO who is burning out? Oh my heavens, I could talk about this. Who is at the top and has no one to go within the organization? It's really unhealthy to be trying to support a team when you are burning out or burnt out. Oh my God, Julie, I can't even, absolutely. And this is where, you should be able to, and I say you should be able to, and I know people are going to go, oh my gosh, I could never do that. You should be able to go to your board chair. So that should be your safe space. And unfortunately, not everybody feels that way, that maybe they don't have the relationship with their board chair. But I'd love the thoughts of our panel today. Hannah, what do you think?
Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind too is like there's a lot of like support groups in terms of like Facebook groups and stuff of other EDs that you could then kind of have like a little cohort and have other EDs and managers kind of support each other. Fortunately, with our little group that we work with and our network, we have like management meetings where all the managers get together and we talk through problems and at a more higher level and kind of working through that. And then just planning like retreats for the managers and EDs to kind of get together to build that sense of community. And we find if you build that community, you build that support system with other EDs, then that would definitely help. And then I think just also kind of taking a step back and realizing as an ED, like why you're doing what you're doing, and focusing on the mission of the organization and why you started this in the first place, and kind of just getting back to the roots and taking that time to reflect and making sure. And I think those definitely would help a little bit.
And I think, when, and I obviously want to get Krystyn's thoughts too, but I think because when I was talking about being really lonely, like, those are the lonely spots, lonely at the top. There's a reason they say that, right? Is because you feel like you've got to be strong for the team. You don't want the board to think you're crumbling. A lot of people, are not, especially during the pandemic, didn't take vacation. And we've got a question in a minute about separating, work life and all of those things, which is a popular topic. But it definitely can feel lonely, can it, Krystyn?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a reason why it's the executive directors and senior leaders who are the most likely to burn out, is because they feel all that pressure and they have the fewest people that they can share with. I agree completely with Hannah. The first thing I feel like it's always reach out. I'll try, like, this isn't something that someone can navigate alone. And if you're in your own head, it's going to get worse. So that's always the first thing. I think that peer support, find it where you can get it, is great. And then figure out what part of the problem you want to solve. I think that there's a natural tendency amongst most EDs to want to be problem solvers. And so this one's really going to gnaw at you. If it's there nagging at you and it's not going away, then your problem solving is going to kick in. And there will be things within your control and things that aren't within your control. But don't gaslight yourself either. Like, there is a limit to the number of friendships you can have and spa days you can take to make a horrible workload or impossible working conditions okay. You're really just prolonging something at that point. So kind of, I think, take some time with yourself to figure out, what do you need to be, to live your best life. There's a great quote that I love, and I can't remember who the author was, but it's, imagine that the universe is your employer, not your organization. What would you do? What would your job description be? What could you do on this planet during the time that you have that only you could do? And look honestly at the organization you're in. And if it's not the place where you can fulfill that job description, don't kid yourself. That might be a conversation you need to have with a trusted friend or your family to figure out what's right for you at this moment in time. And then if you do decide to stay, then if you can, if you're happy with the organization or the mission or the work overall, start to chip away at those things that cause the stress. What is it? Is it the funding? Is it the precariousness of the funding? Is it the lack of support that you have on the board? Is it the ever expanding mission or the ever shrinking mission, or the clients or the issues that you face? And build a way to make those components work without trying to solve every single problem simultaneously.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant. And I feel like we could honestly, I promise I won't keep you here all night, but I do think we could have a couple of hours on this. We're seeing lots of great questions and comments come in. Dear friend of mine, Sandra. Hi, Sandra. So good to see you. She's an executive director. She's a rock star. She's just put a note here in the chat. As IED, my board thinks that the majority of my time should be spent fundraising, but the reality is HR is totally consuming my time among other operational needs. That should be put on a sweatshirt that most executive directors wear. Yeah, absolutely feel that. And Aaron's got a great question here as well about work-life balance. But what I'm going to suggest now, because we want to hear from Chantel. Hi, Chantel.
Hi.
There she is. Chantel's going to share a little bit with us. Now she's our sponsor. Thank you so much, Chantel. And then we'll come back and finish up some of these great thoughts and questions. Thanks, Chantel. Take it away.
Excellent. Thank you, Sam. Yes, I will try and be quick because you guys have amazing questions and I want to make sure that they can answer them for you. So hopefully you can see my screen okay. Perfect. Yeah, so talking about burnout and exhaustion, what is more tedious than bookkeeping, right? So my name is Chantal. I'm the executive director for Green Book. And what we are is a bookkeeping social enterprise. We provide bookkeeping services to environmental nonprofits all throughout Canada. So, just a little bit of what I will briefly touch on is who we are, why we do what we do, our services, and how to get a hold of us. So who we are, so Greenbooks was actually established back in 2015. We were an early partner of Sustainable Eastern Ontario. And we started as a pilot program. So our funder was actually an executive director for a different nonprofit. And they realized, as many EDs do, that bookkeeping is exhausting. And if you don't have the background or the financial knowledge, you end up spending hours upon hours trying to figure out how to manage the books, how to do payroll, financial statements, the whole 9 yards. And so we were actually established, as a way to combat this. And, to give us a little bit of our timeline, we started in 2015. We started growing throughout 2015, 2016, gaining more clients. There was a lot of demand for our services. And eventually in 2021, we became federally incorporated. So now, we have clients all throughout Canada. 2022, we were able to hire more bookkeepers to expand to help support you amazing nonprofits. And to date, we are currently working with over 50 nonprofits. These are our partners. So like I said, we started with Sustainable Eastern Ontario, and Sustainable Capacity Foundation is our seed funder. And then we are one of the 5 social enterprises that make up the Sustainable Capacity Solution. The others are Sustainable Philanthropy, CBI, Eco-Internships, and Eco-Executive Director. So our service, how exactly do we help you guys, right? Like, we're bookkeeping. We just want to do your books and take your money. No. So like I said, we focus for bookkeeping for nonprofits. We can do everything up and until you need an accountant. And it's the idea that, like, as you grow, so will your books. So we start with small shop nonprofits, usually under $1 million in annual revenue. And we want to help you guys gain financial independence. So we're there for you, whether you have no staff or 5 staff, we're there to do that. And we'll help you get there. We're gonna, as you hire more staff, get more funding, we're gonna make sure you have the financial records to apply for grants, that kind of thing. These are just a couple of our services. We do everything from data entry to advisory. We work with QuickBooks. That way we can create your financial statements, do tax filing, profit and loss balance sheets, payroll, the whole suite to support you guys. And these are all services that we have been able to identify that nonprofits need, up and until you need an accountant. And like I said, we work with small shops, and we want to make sure we can help build you up. So depending on your annual revenue will determine the cost you pay. So all of those services that are in the last slide, there are all included in one monthly fee, right? So, if you're 50,000 or less, $100 a month, 50 to 150, $150 a month, and so on and so forth. But the great thing about us is we do offer pro bono services for anyone that's under an annual revenue of $10,000. Again, it's the idea that we are here to help build your organization, build your financial capacity, so that eventually you can actually graduate from Greenbooks with complete financial independence. And this is just a testimonial from one of our clients. So Alex Keenan is the treasurer of the Canadian Environmental Network. And he so kindly wrote that Greenbooks understood the unique challenges of running a nonprofit, which not all bookkeepers do. There are constant fluxes in funding and changing of staff with varying salaries. This could be tricky to manage and requires a bookkeeping service that understands the complexity within the nonprofit. And that's just what we strive to do. We want to make sure we understand your operations and how you run your nonprofit so that your books accurately represent that for when you get funding. Yeah, so I kept that as brief as I could so you guys can keep asking your questions. Like I said, my name is Chantal. Here is my email and our website. So please feel free to reach out, send me a message, or you can also book a consultation on our website. Thank you.
Well, that's fantastic. Thank you so much. Appreciate that, Chantel, as always. And you're right, we do have a great, you're getting lots of love, by the way, in the chat. So we love green books is what we're seeing here. So we had some outstanding questions that we want to get to. Aaron's asking, can you give any tips on how to make that separation between home life and work life? So the comment here is, I've heard about daily habits or rituals to start and end the workday to clearly mark that transition, but I haven't had any luck implementing them. Work and life just blend together. I know somebody, honest to God, this is before the pandemic, but I know somebody that worked from home, and they used to get up and pretend they were going to work, and they would walk around the block and come back and go to their office. As a way of marking the day, they would do the same thing at the end of the day, walk around the block and come home. So it sounds silly, but I do think that those rituals do help us. Krystyn, what do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a big fan of rituals and habits as a way of doing small things that turn into big impact. So I think maybe if it's not working for you, either you tried to do something that's too difficult, like too different from whatever it is that you're doing, as opposed to a small ritual, or you didn't give yourself enough chances. Maybe you forgot a few times, and then it seemed like it failed. So I think just keep trying, and then one day you will remember. There are some standard books, Atomic Habits and things like that, about looking for cues and prompting you to act. Any of those habit development pieces of advice are all built on the same research and the same studies, so that might help find something that works for you, but just keep at it. And then the one thing is, in terms of balance, I think it's important to understand that balance is like what happens when you have a couple of different things happening. So there's not one perfect activity that represents complete balance. So I'm done working and now I'm doing this, and now I am at home. Give yourself an opportunity to kind of live in a transition space where you're still half at work and still half at home. And of course, from what I understand, everything I've just said goes out the window if you have children.
Yeah. Oh my heavens, that is the truth. I don't want to admit it, but it's the truth. And your thoughts, Hannah?
Yeah, I know I'm very much guilty of trying to find that separation between work and home myself. But I know, like, we usually actually ask the interns what is your ritual, or come up with one if you don't have one. And so I've definitely read a couple interesting ones, and some is just going to the gym or doing like a yoga sort of session afterwards. If you happen to have a separate space in your house, to leave it, close the door, don't go back. But if you don't, you're just having a table, you're using the kitchen dining room table, to actually close all the tabs in the browser, close the laptop, or put things away, so that or separate it so that you're not always looking at work emails. Take it off your phone. So a lot of the time the work email, sometimes we'll put them on our phone. Either turn notifications off or sign out on your phone, so you're not habitually checking your phone for emails. So those are different things. For myself, I tend to finish around right before dinner. So my transition is I close everything and then I cook food. So I'm not even at my desk, I'm doing something else. So I find that helps me of that transition from work to home. It's okay, no more work, I got to cook myself so I can eat. So I find those definitely help as well. Yeah, getting outside, doing kind of just moving around, and I find those help. And I find too, if you're on your computer a lot, even just personal stuff, creating a separate browser. So I know Chrome, you can do it where you'll have all of your work bookmarks separate from your personal ones. So that way, when you open Chrome, you're not seeing all of your work stuff as well as your personal things. So if you still want to be on the computer, it gives that separation as well. So that's one thing I find is really helpful, if you can create that separate internet browser with different bookmarks, and that prevents you from checking those again.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's such a great suggestion. And Charlie is giving a great tip here too. Setting phone reminders can also be great for forming those kinds of habits. And I think that's a really good idea. I used I'm remembering now, I was doing that and I stopped doing that. So, and I think go back to what you said, Krystyn, it's about remembering, just, not perfection. I think sometimes we sacrifice the good for the perfect, right? So it doesn't have to be perfect. You know, you sort of alluded to that as well. We have something here from Eric, and Eric's talking about building on the discussion about ED burnout. How do you recommend coaching people who manage you, recognizing the power imbalance when they don't seem to recognize they're burning out and the team suffers as a result? This could be an 8-part series. this question. It's a really, really good question. Hannah, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, I think part of it is I experienced it where my manager, when I was an intern, like they were burning themselves out because they weren't asking for help. So I think like as an intern, I really wasn't sure what, like I recognized it, but I wasn't really sure how to approach my manager being like, I can do stuff. I can help you out. So I think part of it was just volunteering. If I knew I had the capacity to do it, being like, I can help out with this specific project when we did like team meetings and stuff. So having it as like a suggestion and offering to help, because then it makes it also seem like you have the initiative as someone that's underwards of, oh, I want to take this initiative to help you out. So it might not seem like I'm going to take this over because you're burning out. And then, yeah, if you happen to have that relationship with your manager, then you could potentially talk to them and be like, I've noticed that you seem tired, or talk about weekends or something. But in terms of if it's someone above you, usually I would, if you have the capacity yourself, so make sure you're not volunteering and saying yes for things to burn yourself out, but kind of the offering and maybe offering to help out on something or take over a piece of a project, I find would help at least start that conversation with your managers and supervisors.
Because it goes back to culture again, right, Krystyn? It goes back to if someone's setting that kind of pace, then you feel, I felt like this as well, then you feel like if I'm not responding to that email at 8:30 at night, then I'm not a great employee. I'm not as passionate as my manager, when reality, you might be tucking your kids in at night.
Yeah, and I think there's a potentially a generational, not necessarily like the age you are, but sort of 2022 versus 20 years ago, where like I don't think that we wear burnout as a badge of honor the way that maybe we used to. And I remember when I was coming into the environmental world, the stories I would hear about how hard people struggled and how awful it was. And it was like, if you hadn't struggled as much as they had, you weren't as worthy, or you didn't belong there. And I think, you know, you see that as well in relationships with women and entering the workforce. And there's this sense of like, it was bad for me, so it should be bad for you too, so you could prove yourself. So I think if there's that element going on, then you might just like be having two different conversations because you don't share the same set of values. But if it is a person that you know you do share the same values with, and you can go to them, I think it really depends. Is it a situation where you want them to, do you want to know if they're okay? And it might just be asking them like, are you okay? Because I know you really well, or I care about you and I don't think you are. And they might not actually want to answer that for a couple of days because you might catch them off guard. For other people, it might be a much more practical approach, because if they're really overwhelmed, it's like you don't want to bring them another thing to think about. That's where, you know, Hannah mentioned that approach of like, here are a couple of things I've noticed. How about I do this, or let me try that, or I would like to take this off your plate. It would help me grow, and show them the benefits to you or to the team. It would be great for morale if we could tell one success story at every staff meeting. It would be great for the younger people on the staff if they could have an opportunity to take a hand at some of these management activities with supervision. So just figure out specifically what rituals or routines or tasks would you want to approach differently, so that you're not asking an overwhelmed person to take on yet another project, which is unburning out.
Wow. I would love, I know Rob Barnes is here, I would love to make the search edition for this time of year to have this conversation. I think it was a really important conversation today. Thanks for all the great dialogue as well in the chat and all the great questions. Krystyn Tully, thank you so much for everything you brought today to our webinar. And Hannah Rockburn, what would we do without you? Hannah, of course, is here every single time, but it was really nice to get your perspective as well, Hannah, because you do definitely have a really important perspective. Chantel, a big thank you as well to you and to Green Books, and of course the one and only Rob Barnes, Capacity Building. Appreciate your time as well, and sharing about capacity building. I'm looking forward to 2023. The dates are already in my calendar, so I'm excited about that. We know the dates were shared for the first couple a few minutes ago as well as we started the day, but we're hoping that you'll join us in 2023, and hoping today that you've walked away with even one or two things that can help you move forward and head into the new year. But I hope the one thing that everybody remembers when they leave today is, and it's something that Krystyn said so beautifully, you're not alone at all, right? So so definitely hope that you've taken that away today. It's been my pleasure and my honor to spend time with you in 2022, and especially today. Thank you, everyone.